So growing up, I grew up in a Christian home, and as a result of this, growing up, I memorized lots of verses of the Bible. But I wasn't always good at this. When I first started memorizing scripture, I really struggled with this. I have always had trouble remembering things, and so memorizing scripture was always very hard for me. But one day, a friend of mine showed me this method to memorize scripture, and I don't know if that story sounds like you. If so, this method will work great for memorizing scripture. So, step one, usually I write down the verse. So, I'm going to pick a verse. Usually, I use a notebook sort of like this. You can use whatever, a piece of paper or something. Typically, I write it down 1 to 3 times. So, I'll use the verse Galatians 5:1. So, the verse says, "For freedom, Christ has set us free." Stand firm, therefore. And do not submit to a yoke of slavery. So, this does 2 very important things. One, it allows me to write down each of these words and kind of focus on what word is in the sentence. So, as I write it down, I'm slowing down my thought process rather than I'm just looking at it. Second, it allows me to visualize the words, so that way I kind of have an idea of what words are there, and I can reference that. The next step is to read the verse 10 times. And I know this sounds very repetitive, but the idea is that we're building muscle memory, or in this case, tongue memory. So for the sake of this video and for the sake of the speech, I will only read it 5 times. But for freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit to the yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit to a yoke of slavery. So, the third step, very similar to the second step, we are going to say it again 3 times, well, 10 times for this method, but for the sake of the speech, 3 times. And I am going to try and look away as much as I can, but I will cheat and I'll look back at it on certain words that I may struggle with remembering or that I've forgotten from the last time I had said it. So, for freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. So, after I've said it, and I've finished step 3, usually I should have the verse. Sometimes it may vary. Some verses may be a little bit longer, others may be a little bit shorter. So you may have to say it more times than other verses. But in most cases, I've noticed that 10 times typically is enough to have it memorized. So by the time I've reached this next step, I should have this verse memorized. So now I'm going to say this verse 10 times. For this sake, I'll probably say it 3 times again. This time though, no cheating. So, for freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. So, if you follow each of these steps, each step is building off of another step. So, step 1, we are writing it down. We're visualizing each of those words, and we're gaining a good idea of what we are to say. Step 2, we're building that repetition, so we're going to say it over and over again. Step 3, again, we're building off of what step 2 was, so we've been saying it, but this time we're cheating, so words that we may not remember or have forgotten, we can look back to and remember that. And then step 4, we are saying it now for long-term memory. So that way, later that day or the next day, I can think back, okay, what was the verse I memorized? And I remember it, and I don't have to look at it. So we're building that long-term memory. That's our end goal of this method. So I really hope this has helped you guys to figure out how to memorize verses, or if you're in a play, lines in a play that are important. This has helped me, and it's helped me be able to memorize things that I used to struggle with. So I hope this helps you as well.